show where we talk all things talents in Connecticut, as always. And I'm pleased to have on a returning guest, a recent graduate of Crosby, former quarterback, and also be going to play football at the next level at the Juco side at Hudson Valley. Tanner Leo. Tanner, as always, saw you around dirt basketball. I'd see you after. Great to have you back on the podcast.
It's always a pleasure. You know, I love talking to you.
I know. I mean, who can not love talking to me, right?
I disagree.
Tanner, obviously, I have you back on and I could talk to you. I know we've been talking for almost an hour as far as just going over the basketball side. We were talking about the last football season, and that's why I have you back on here. The Bulldogs last year went 5-5. It was a season that had some ups, some downs. I know you dealt with some injuries too. Before we get into some of the games and maybe what could have been, just talk to me about your senior year, man. I mean, you really produced a lot of high octane numbers.
Yeah. It was a time coming. I had been working really, really hard. I mean, last time I was on here, before the season, I had been telling you, I actually go back and I watch the interview sometimes, especially my sophomore year. I was putting in the work for that during COVID and stuff like that when nobody else was. And I think it was on its way, no matter what. And I'm grateful that it happened.
Looking at how this season turned out, and I know I did not have an opportunity to broadcast the games, I was able to go to a game against Watertown. And that game, among a couple others, kind of really struck me because it was a 1-point game. It was a weird game. It was cold and windy. I'm sure you remember it well. And then in the beginning of the season, too, you had Woodland and Holy Cross. When you look at those games in particular, how close they were, and even Career, too, that was a 20-13 game. That game was played without fans for reasons we will not discuss, but without fans. When I don't know if you've ever had an opportunity, Tanner, to kind of sit back and just reflect. Maybe you have. But if you have, looking at those games, do you ever think to yourself, man, if we could have just won those games, we're 9-1 with that Nagy loss. We're in the playoffs.
Yeah. I think about it probably every day. It's hard to explain it. Because, you get those people that come up to you and went oh, 5-5 from Crosby. That's good for Crosby. And, you try to just say yeah, thank you. And you move on. But in my head, it's very hard to accept that because I still to this day don't think people realized how much talent was really on that team and is still on that team. But we were a force to be reckoned with, and we were a ticking bomb, and it was a pleasure to play with that for 1 point.
As the season progressed, I know that the first couple games, as we talked about, Woodland and Holy Cross were losses. You were able to finally get on the winning side in a defeat against Oxford. But then you lose the Career, as we talked about, and then you got the close or non-close games against Derby and St. Paul. At that point, after the St. Paul game, you guys were 5-3. Talk to me about kind of what was the attitude like, because at the time, although very slim, especially being in Double L, there was still an opportunity, if you guys were able to run the table, to at the very least be in conversation for that last 2 spots potentially for the playoffs. So what was the conversation like?
Yeah, so we had went 1-3 after week 4. But it was a weird 1-3. It wasn't we didn't feel 1-3 because Woodland was probably the best high school football game I've ever been a part of. And then Holy Cross, we got out fast. Oxford, we were just handling from the jump. And Career, we got unlucky. It was we knew we were right there. So then after Career, we go into that Derby Watertown, or not Derby Watertown, Derby St. Paul. And, we knew what was going to happen. And we didn't take that. I think that was one thing that was really good about our team is the average teams, which our record was average, but as people, we weren't. The average teams would blow out a Derby and a St. Paul and, be all excited. We didn't treat it like that. We were very like adamant about like, we knew that was going to happen. Like, let's look to the next one. And we were sitting back at practice and it got serious. It got eerie and serious because we knew we had a shot and we knew we had to put everything to the wall and grind it out. But there was a shot. We were in the office at the end of every week, like the day after a game or the next practice after a game, looking at the points for playoffs. And we're adamant about trying to do everything we could in our control to get there.
The loss to Watertown, and I know I mentioned it before, I was at that game. It was weird because you wake up in the morning and it was freezing cold. I remember there was frost on my car, but then as the day went on, it got a little bit warmer. But little did we know that the game itself was going to be kind of low scoring. It was only 7-6. And then Crosby had an opportunity. I remember, I think you guys were able to score late. If I remember right, you could correct me on that. And then I know there was a chance for a field goal, but then like it was through the duration of the game, Crosby kind of shooting themselves in the foot, a lot of penalties, and that forced the kick to be a lot farther in terms of high school range. And I know Crosby, to my knowledge, really didn't kick field goals. So it was tough. So kind of just take me into that game and, how were you after that?
So it was a weird game. They played us great. They were just sending a lot of pressure and it was hard to deal with. We couldn't that was probably the first time all year we couldn't get the offense going, and that was a weird feeling because our offense was every game like it was pretty ridiculous and we just couldn't get it going. And then we scored late. We were going to go for two. The initial plan was to go for two. We get a false start, backs us up, so we go to kick the PAT to tie it, probably like a 25, 30-yarder. He shanked it right. And we still had another shot after that. We got to stop. We got 3 and out. Got the ball back, and we went 3 and out. I hurt my foot. I hurt my foot earlier in the game, and we were just we struggled. We couldn't get the ball going. Part of that's my fault. I did miss a touchdown at one point that probably could have won us the game earlier in the game, but it was a very awkward feeling. I think we knew they were good. We didn't expect them to like come out and lock down. Like they had a couple DBs that were like Taji was having some trouble at one point. Like they were good. They were a good team. And they could have been a playoff team until Thanksgiving. They were in the race. So, you know what I mean? It was a struggle. But after that game, I think we just put our head down because at that point that knocked us out of the playoffs pretty much. And I think we just put our head down and we wanted to just grind it out. And the goal was to try to finish positive, which we were almost there, but it didn't change. We were a good group. We were a good unit. We didn't get down on each other and we went, it was what it was. There was nothing we could do about it.
The team was able to finish strong, finishing, 2 of 3, winning 2 of the last 3 games. You beat Wilby, you beat Kennedy. And that Kennedy game in particular was the last game that you were able to play in a Crosby uniform. How was the emotion as far as just, going into that game and then as the clock was winding down, knowing that it'd be your final time wearing a Crosby uniform?
Yeah. It was weird. I love football. Football was like my life. Like I didn't do anything else. I wasn't emotional at first. Like when we were getting ready, I was more worried about my shoulder, to be honest with you. I hadn't practiced all week. This was my first time in pads all week. First time like actually throwing was during warm-ups and stuff. And then we went to do the senior walkouts. Everybody walked. And then I saw Jeff Burke walk and I started tearing up. And because that was my guy. We came from JV together. We got moved up at the same time, like class as freshmen. Like that was my guy. And when I watched him walk, I teared up. That was the first bit of emotion. And then the game was emotional, not crying. I mean, that was a tough game. And then ending the way it did, I throw a touchdown to take the lead with a minute left to a senior, Taji. And then last play of the game, they throw up a prayer. Jeff picks it off for a pick six. And I also threw a 2-point conversion to Jeff. So it was a very full circle moment. And we ran into the end zone, and Jeff was bawling his eyes out. And that touched me. Because I hugged Jeff, and that was kind of like the last thing I kind of remember was me and Jeff walked off together, and the newspaper interviewed us together. And that was kind of how I left. And I left how I came in with him. And that was a very touching moment for me.
With, the game of football, and I believe sports always, it's crazy how things, like you said, come full circle in a lot of ways, and I've always believed that sports can be very, not in the terms of what romantic means in some ways, but in terms of, like you mentioned, coming up with your friend, your football brother, your teammate at the same time, and with your other fellow seniors, and being able to go and finish the season strong after what was a very up and down football season. I know after the season, it was tough kind of seeing the other teams get ahead as far as continuing in the playoffs, Tanner. But I know you were putting in the work. I know you were doing stuff with the Crosby Bulldogs basketball team. I know you were doing the book. You and I were able to talk after. And then you told me how you were looking at schools. And I was asking you, and you were kind of giving me some of the schools that you were potentially were going. And then at one point you said, hey, I picked a school. Be ready at, I think it was like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, something like that. And you announced you were going to Hudson Valley. Now, for people who may not know, that is Juco. So for the people who would like to know, and I think there's a lot who will, what is Hudson Valley? Where is it? And why did you decide to go there?
It's a Juco in Troy, New York, right across the bridge from Albany. So view Albany, not even 5 minutes away. I was looking at my options, and to be honest, I felt I could do better. And I decided pretty much at the last moment. I talked to Coach Jonas, and he told me, he said, if you're going to give it everything you got, give it everything you got, and go Juco. Because we were in the weight room, and I'll probably remember this conversation forever. We were in the weight room. Everybody had left, and I was sitting there talking to him. And he told me, he said, I know how you are with football, and I know how serious you take it. If you don't go Juco, you're going to regret it. And I took that, and I went for like the next 5 week or two, and it sat with me, because I think that was a God honest truth, that if I went to a Division III and I got stuck there and I couldn't get out, then I don't think I would look back at it and be happy. I think if I go Juco and I give it everything, like every ounce I got, and I end up at a D3, then so be it. But at least I know I gave it everything I had. And I think it's a great place for me. They just, from the past year, sent, I think 5 or 4 to Division I. The coaching staff's great. I love them. The area is great. Albany, as I mentioned, is right there. That's a Division I program. I play great competition. I get to play Nassau. I get to play, not this year, but normally they play Monroe. So I'm playing some top level opponents at times, and I think it just fit. It fit, and I think I'm gonna end up leaving that place knowing I gave it everything I got. And I think that's, to be able to live with yourself in that decision is the most important thing.
Tanner, before I let you go, and I really do appreciate coming back, on the podcast. I've told you this before. I've told your father many times that I've spoken with him. I do believe that coaching is in your future. I think you will be a coach at some point. I don't know if you believe that. I don't know if your dad's told you that, but I do think you will be a coach someday. Have you given that any thought before I let you go?
Yeah, 1,000%. That's where my money's at. That's just, it's in my blood. Yeah, 100%. I think, I don't know in what aspect. I don't know where. I don't know how. Mm-hmm. But yeah, trust me, Coach Scott, Coach Jonas, we've all sat down and laughed about it, because even now I tend to get up above my level and start coaching by accident, and it's not my job. But yeah, that's gonna be my thing at some point, 100%.
Good, and I hope you come back to Connecticut and coach in the NVL, because that would be awesome to see you there. That'd be great, Tanner.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Why not? But anywho, Tanner, once again, as always, great to be able to have you on the podcast. Best of luck at Hudson Valley. And I'm sure that you'll keep me up to date as far as what's going on with you at Juco.
100%. Maybe I'll bump into you at the gym.
That would be even better. As always, Tanner, thank you. That wraps things up on the Connecticut Sports Talent Show. So until next time, stay safe. And remember, CT stands for Connecticut Talent, and I'm on Jerry Find Them All. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and be well.